So welcome everyone to what are we? Thursday, August 21st. How is it? August 21st. Welcome to the August 21st Power BI version of the Vancouver Power BI Modern Excel User Group. Today we've got Joseph with us, but before we do this, I'm just going to dive in and do our standard thanking of our sponsors. So. This meetup, as all meetups, is sponsored by Skillwave, which is our training company where we teach people how to use Excel and Power BI in new and amazing ways. So if you're looking for some great training, you should definitely check us out. Excel Guru is the parent company of Skillwave and also the creator and distributor of Monkey Tools, my Excel add-in to help you build better data models and basically make your Excel life easier. Our next meetups that we have coming up here in a couple of weeks, we've got Puneet Goja is going to be joining us, and he's going to be talking about Excel and Copilot. So there's some new news in that sort of space there with a new Copilot function being released to beta. So you may want to come and check that out. We also have another speaker that we are just working the final details out with right now. So not quite ready to announce her name, but they're going to be coming up in a month's time for something really awesome as well. Very much looking forward to that because I know who it is, but I can't quite tell you yet until we've got everything nailed down, I's dotted and T's crossed and all that kind of jazz. But watch out for this. It'll be a good session. I'm looking forward to it. Just a quick note on Monkey Tools. The latest sort of official release build was on July 8th, where we added our new current workbook features, basically building a better building a user entry point from the user interface in order to get data from this workbook. It doesn't exist in Excel. We've also taken the default Excel version that you can create using a custom function. We've made it better so that it actually looks the same as what your external Excel workbook does. It's kind of a cool little function for those who need it. We've also added keyboard accessibility shortcuts to the menu. This is done just to make it easier to work with other automation software like OA Robot and things like that, but makes it a little bit more accessible for users. So some of the cool stuff there, and of course bug fixes, the standard things that we always do with Monkey Tools. If you're interested, you can always go to monkeytools.ca and check it out. It does have a free version and pro trials, as well as, of course, a pro license version that you can buy as well. Just a quick note, there's only about 10 days left in our Summer of Learning special at Skillwave, where we've got 50% off all of our on-demand video courses and 30% off any of our coached courses that have access to the Ask Ken Anything sessions. There is no better time to buy. We've never discounted to this degree before, so don't miss out on these things. Speaking of the coached courses, our Excel Fundamentals Academy, the next kickoff date we have for this is September 10th. If you or someone on your team is looking to sort of round out and fill out some knowledge gaps in Excel, this covers everything from basic formulas to pivot tables, data visualization, and Power Query, and includes access to the live Ask Ken Anything sessions. Just did one of these yesterday, 2 hours, where I went through and answered all kinds of questions. A lot of fun, really enjoyed it. It's a great add to these things because you know what, you can find video classes all over the place, but getting access to an expert to get help with your questions is something that we think is pretty special about this particular course. If you're already past the fundamentals, you can always check out our Self-Service BI Academy. We actually throw the fundamentals in for free with this one, but this is the one that takes you through Excel, Power Query, Power Pivot, Power BI, and can really build some amazing stuff here. It's a very comprehensive program, even includes Monkey Tools. It is definitely worth checking out if you want to up your game in the business intelligence space. All right, this meetup, along with all meetups, will be recorded and posted to the Skillwave YouTube channel. It will take me probably an extra day to get this one up just because I'm actually not in my office today, but it will be posted, and once it is posted, we will make sure that we let you know via the meetup site, or of course, if you're subscribed to the YouTube channel, you get notified immediately as well. So just watch out for that because I'm sure that you'll want to rewatch some of the stuff that Joseph's got for you today. And on our penultimate slide here, I just want to make a quick mention on this. We are always looking for new speakers. If you've got something that you think is cool and interesting around Excel or Power BI or anything in the Power Platform stack that you'd like to share with us, we got a great group here. We're always looking for new people. Just get in contact with us via the form below here, and we'll get you on our show. And on that, I'm going to jump over to this, and this is the beginning of the 10th year of VanPug. And one of the things that I wanted to do with this one is said, you know what, I actually want to turn over this session to one of the guys that has been instrumental in making this whole meetup work for us for so long. I'm sure for those of you who've been here before, you know Joseph. Joseph is does our what's new in Power BI segment every month that we're doing this kind of stuff, and has been a huge contributor to this. And I thought, you know what, how cool would it be if we can get him back here to give us a full length session? So I think you're going to skip the what's new part on this one, right? You're just going to go into the classics and the hits and the mixtape.
I think so. Yeah. Although
Fair
you
enough.
could say it's what's new over the last 10 years.
Well, there you
So.
go. There you go. It's very themed. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, let me turn the screen over to you, my friend, and the floor is yours.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you, Ken, and welcome everybody to the August 2025 meetup group. As Ken said, usually I do the what's new in Power BI, and we're going to be skipping that today, and we'll just jump straight into the main presentation, which is my Power BI Mixtape Volume 2. So as Ken just said, today we're celebrating a pretty big milestone, like for both our user group and a few months ago, Power BI is turning 10. So, we've come a long way in the last 10 years. And when Ken asked me to, if I wanted to present, to sort of line up with this anniversary, it made sense to me, and it sort of got me thinking just how far Power BI as a tool has come in the last 10 years, and some of the things that either just wasn't possible in the tool or it was really difficult to do now is actually like pretty easy in this native functionality that we can do these things. So I figured, why don't we build a presentation to cover sort of how far we've come and how the tool has been transformed, that some of those complex workarounds now are built-in features. So in this session, we're going to take a look at sort of that before and after to see how Power BI has evolved. And we're going to highlight 3 features specifically. We're going to be looking at field parameters, we're going to be looking at visual calculations, and we're going to be looking at the bookmark navigator. And my goal is really to walk away with some practical tips, maybe just a little bit of nostalgia to see how far we've come, and a fresh appreciation of what's possible with Power BI today. So before we jump into the session, just an introduction for those who maybe this is your first time jumping on the Vancouver Power BI meetup group. My name is Joseph Yeates, and I'm an analytics consultant and a contributor to this meetup group. I'm a consultant and instructor with expertise in Power BI, Excel, SQL, and also a little bit of R and Python as well. So I've worked across a few different industries over the years, and I've helped organizations turn data into clear and actionable insights. Up here on the screen is my website with my blog, feathersanalytics.com. And Ken was just asking before, how many times have you presented at the meetup group? It must be close. And a lot of my old presentations are up on my website here. I had one earlier this year, Master the Matrix, that I still need to get up, and Power BI Mixtape Volume 2 will be up here shortly as well. So you can check out all the files, a link to the video that Ken will upload. And where's Power? There we go. And Power BI Mixtape Volume 1 as well, if you're interested. But with that was an introduction of the session, an introduction to me. But let's jump straight into Power BI so we can start looking at our first example. So in our first scenario here, what we want to do is we have these 2 charts. We see revenue by department, revenue by location. And we're tasked with the scenario that we want to create just a single chart that can display these same 2 visuals, these same 2 sort of views of the data as we see here. We want to replicate it in one visual. So using like a toggle in a slicer, we want the report user to be able to choose to display total revenue by either the employee department that we see up here, or by the client location that we see down here. So the new way to do this is to use field parameters. And I've talked about field parameters quite a bit with the what's new in Power BI, and they've been a part of some previous sessions that I've presented as well. And what field parameters allow us to do is to dynamically switch between different measures or different fields from our data model using a slicer. And so it creates a parameter table. It was introduced back in 2022, I think. So we're coming up to 3 years, or I guess we've had field parameters for a little over 3 years now. And just a couple months ago, it was released to be generally available. It finally came out of preview. It's generally available in the Power BI tool. But before we jump into field parameters, why don't we look to see how we could achieve the same functionality the old way, pre-field parameters, what we had to do in order to build this out. So we know we want department, which is from our employee table. We know we want location, which is from our client table, but we want to be able to toggle between the two of them. So there are a few different ways that we could have done this pre-field parameters. I'm just going to focus on one today, and that's creating essentially like an axis table in our data model and creating multiple relationships from that table to our fact table. So let's open up our Power Query editor, and I'll show you how we can do this. So I'm going to reference our fact table that we're interested in, and I'm just going to take the location and the department column from our fact table. I'm going to remove all the other columns, and I'm going to remove duplicates. Actually, I don't need to remove duplicates just yet. So we just selected our location and our department column. Let's rename this dim, let's say field parameter. Let's do that. And can we zoom in a little bit too? Perfect. And so right now, our location column has all the different values of location that we may want to put on the axis of our column chart. And the department column has all the values of the department that we may need to put on the axis. But there's not really a way to choose if we want location or department with our data structured like this. But what we can do is select both of these columns, and we want to unpivot them. And now we have an attribute column where we can choose location or department. We have a value column, which has the value that we want to put on the axis. So I'm going to rename these things so it's a little bit more clear. Let's rename attribute to column and value to axis. And at this point, I can remove duplicates. And now we have a small table, which I'll just sort here. We see that we have 8 values of department, which is the 8 departments in our organization where employees can reside. And we have 3 locations where our clients can reside, Canada, United States, or a remote client. So now I have this set up using Power Query. I can close and apply this to our data model. And once that's done, I can head into the model view here. And this is when I need to start relating our data. So we have our axis, we have our column in our dim field parameters. And so from axis, I'm just going to drag and create a relationship to department. And we see that we get a one-to-many relationship because we just have distinct values of department in our dim field parameters table. The only update I'm going to make is I'm going to make this relationship inactive, and I'll show you why in just a second. So we have one relationship to our fact table from our dimension. Axis is joined through to department. I'm going to do the same thing, axis joined through to location. We're going to have that same one-to-many relationship. I'm going to make it inactive, and I'm going to hit save. So now if we focus just on these two tables here, we have 2 one-to-many relationships from our dim field parameter table to our fact table. As I say, both are inactive, but this is the setup for how we're going to generate that dynamic chart. So now what I can do is I am going to just copy one of these charts and paste it over here. And instead of having location on our x-axis and our legend from field parameter, I'm going to add axis, of course, not column. And then I'm going to add column to our report page, not as a table, but as a slicer. So when I select department or location, we see when I select department, only department is displayed on the axis. If I select location, only location is displayed on the axis. So this is working to a point, but we can see that all the columns are the same size when I pick either location or department. So we do have the ability to dynamically toggle between two different fields in our data model, but our measure isn't responsive to this just yet. So what we need to do, the last step to make this method work, is to create a new DAX measure. So if I go to our fact finance table, we see that our total revenue measure, which is what we want to display on our dynamic chart, is just basic sum. We're just summing the revenue column from our fact table. But what I need to do is to create a new measure on our fact table. So let's call this dynamic revenue. And to make this work, we're going to use the switch function. And what we're going to be switching is the selected value of the column field from our dimension. So the selected value just returns if we have department or location selected in our slicer. So we can say if the selected value of that column is department, we want to calculate our total revenue. And within our data model, we specifically, and we want to explicitly set that we want to use one of those inactive relationships. So we want to use the relationship, in this case, from our axis to our, to which one? To our department. I'm going to close the brackets. And otherwise, if the selected value is location, we want to do exactly the same thing as we have here, with the exception of we want to use the relationship between axis and location instead. So we're being very explicit here of how we want to display our total revenue based on the selected value from our dimension table. I'm going to hit OK. And now if I drop our dynamic revenue in there instead of our total revenue, when I select department, we see that our revenue here matches our department chart up here. And if I select location, it matches it down here. So it is possible to achieve this dynamic toggling functionality without field parameters, but obviously there are a few drawbacks to this method. That if we go and look at our dimension table that we created from our data model, right now we're only looking at 2 columns from our data model, and there's pretty low cardinality of those columns. There's only 8 possible values of department and 3 possible values of location. But obviously if we're selecting more columns, or there's, in the tens or hundreds of options for this, it could get a very big table, and the transformation to get it to this point might not be very efficient. And at the same time, when we created our DAX measure of doing use relationship, right now we had to sort of hard code or explicitly define just 2 relationships from our dimension to our fact table. But if we want more than 2 columns to be able to toggle between, we have to add an additional statement within our measure for each of those relationships. So that could get quite difficult to maintain or audit, or even just to explain to our users. So this can work, but let's have a look to see how field parameters can make this even easier. So let's copy this visual once more. I'm just going to leave all our old way up here in the top left-hand corner. And so how to create field parameter? Let's go to our modeling tab up here on the ribbon. And under new parameter, I'm going to select a field parameter. So from our employee table, I'm going to select department. And from our client table, I'm going to select location. I'm going to leave this checked on for now with add slicer to this page. I'm going to hit create. So now we have the exact same looking slicer as before. And all I need to do is from our parameter table, add that onto our x-axis. Let's put total revenue onto our y-axis. And really just with a few clicks, we get that exact same functionality as we did up here. We don't have to create any tables. We don't have to create any relationships. We don't have to create any new measures. Everything is done for us. It's applied on top of our existing data model, but we get that same ability to toggle between different columns in our data set. So I think this was one of my favorite new features. It really adds that dynamic element to our report, and it saves us a lot of development time to get to the same point. So that was our first scenario. I think I might check in with the chat just to see how everyone is. Let's have a look. Every location was with different color. We can change that. Yeah, yes, Daniel. I could add a legend onto the chart. I just haven't, just for this example. I don't think I have a single report that doesn't use field parameters. They were a lifesaver. I completely agree. Field parameters are totally a game changer. And yeah, as I just went through the example, makes it a lot easier to get to the same point as was possible before. All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the second scenario. Let's move on to visual calculations. Let me just find my spot. So in this second scenario, we have a line chart here, and we have a matrix visual down the right-hand side. And what we want to do is we want to add a running total to our to the matrix visual here, so we can see this total revenue aggregate over time. And in addition to our running total, we also want to add a 6-month moving average to both our line chart and our matrix visual. And we also want to add some conditional formatting to both of these charts as well. So the new way to do this is using visual calculations. And so visual calculations allow report developers like us define calculations directly within a visual and directly within the context of the visual. So these aren't stored in our data model anywhere. It operates on top of, again, the context of our visual. So on top of like the aggregated data that we see directly within our visual. And it can make adding things like running totals and moving averages way simpler. So visual calculations, I think, came last year. Or they were in preview before September of last year, and now they're enabled by default. I think they're still technically in preview. I don't think visual calculations have been made GA just yet, but we are still seeing constant updates to visual calculations. I demo a lot of these new functionality as it comes out every month with what's new in Power BI. And if you've been part of the Vancouver Power BI meetup group, you would have seen me demo visual calculations quite a bit. But before we get to visual calculations, let's take a look at the old way to achieve some of these things, of how we would need to build, how we would build running totals, moving averages, and conditional formatting. So let's start with a running total. So to add a running total to our matrix visual here, which just aggregates this total revenue over time, the way to do this is to create a DAX measure. So why don't we create a new measure, and we'll call this running, why don't we call it revenue running total. And we'd need to use calculate on our total revenue again. And this is where we would have to do something like we want to look at our entire dim date table, and we want to return our total revenue when the date from our date dimension is less than or equal to the maxed date in the context of our visual. So this is if you are using DAX, this should be a pretty familiar date pattern for running total, right? Is we want to span our entire date table, but within the context of what we're looking at, just return revenue when it's less than or equal to like the current date, essentially. So I'm going to hit OK, and we're going to drop that into our matrix visual, and I'm just going to add some comma separators, and we can make it currency to match total revenue. So here we see for the first month in our first year, our running total is the same as our total revenue. Then when we get to the second month, we add the 2 months of revenue together. We get to the third month, we add the 3, so on and so forth, all the way down to the bottom where we get to 84 million. And what's nice is we can see this bottom month of 84 million is equal to the grand total of just our total revenue. So we know that this running total is working properly. But we did have to create this running total measure in order to get that to work. So that isn't a huge deal to build this. This is a pretty simple DAX DAX like recipe, a DAX formula. But to do something like a moving average, it's a little bit more difficult. If I look at the DAX measure for our 6-month moving average, we have to define like an end date we want to look at here. Then from that end date, we have to select all the dates in that 6-month window. Then we calculate our total revenue across that window. And then we have to calculate the number of months in that window, and we divide it. So there's a lot of moving parts here. And I think the learning curve to learn this DAX is you need to be quite experienced and know what you're doing in order to get a measure like this to work for a moving average, which really is quite a common use case or requirement for a report if you think about it. Usually when we have a line chart, we might want to smooth it out. We might want to see not just a straight line average for the chart, but how is that average moving over time? So if I take our moving average, we can drop that in here. I'm going to turn off the shade area for that moving average. And we can see that flattens some of the spikes or dips in our total revenue over time. So the 6-month average looks like it's working well, but it's complicated to make. So let's see how we could do this instead by using a field parameter, or a visual calculation. We just did field parameters. So I'm going to take this measure off, and actually let's start with our running total on our matrix first. I'm going to go to new visual calculation here. And we have the option to select custom, where we can define our own visual calculation just within this matrix visual, or we can select from one of these like pre-built functions, visual calculation functions. So I'm just going to select running sum. And all I need to enter here in our running sum is from our field picker. I can pick one of the measures that's already in our visual. So I'm going to select our total revenue, hit OK. And now we can see we get the exact same results. Let's make it a bit bigger. We get the exact same results from our visual calculation as that DAX measure we created for our running total. Let's even make it a little bit bigger, maybe. So on the right-hand side here is our running sum visual calculation. To the left is our running total. And without needing to know any DAX, really just from a drop down and a few clicks of selecting our running sum visual calculation, then from another drop down of a field picker to select its total revenue we want to calculate the running sum for, we get the exact same results as that DAX measure, which I think is pretty cool. If we go back to our report, we can do something similar for our moving average here on our line chart. So we can also pick moving average down here from the drop down on the ribbon. So let's pick moving average. And here we just need to pick two things: the field that we want to calculate the moving average for. So in this case, again, it's total revenue, and the window size. So within the context of our visual, we have months on our rows. So our window size is just going to be 6. Is it going to be 6? Because those two things don't add up. Let's see. Is it -6? Nope. Is it 5? Ah, man, don't you love it when a good demo doesn't quite match up? All right, let's move this back to 6. Not 56. Come on. Okay. So let's see. We do have... okay. I'm not going to get stuck in here. This is going to be bothering me. This is going to be bothering me for a while of why they don't match. Let's go back into our report. Although, interestingly, our moving average from our measure here and our moving average down here from our visual calculation do have the same shape. They are moving. They don't reconcile directly to the dollar. So there's probably something wrong with, I would say, the DAX measure that I built for them not to be exactly the same. But I will take a look at this. We can see the shapes are looking quite similar. Let's actually add this here and zoom in. And oh, now they are the same. Okay, weird. Oh, you know what? I was comparing total revenue to the 6-month moving average, wasn't I? I don't know if anyone pointed that out. Let me pull the chat back up. No, okay, yes. I was comparing total revenue to the 6-month moving average, which of course wouldn't be the same between the two. But our measure, our 6-month moving average measure and our visual calculation do match up to the dollar, to the cent. Perfect. I am happy now. Let's remove that. So we can see that what is quite a complicated DAX calculation with a few different variables, a few different steps, is quite, just a few clicky buttons with visual calculations for, again, quite a common requirement of a moving average. So I think this is super cool. This saves a lot of time, and I'm really happy with this. One thing that we haven't covered yet is conditional formatting. So why don't I just remove this, and I'm going to focus on our line chart here and our matrix visual to the right. I'm going to take off our measure here. Perfect. So with conditional formatting, if we use our matrix visual as an example, that's where we can apply in the cell elements pane or section of the format pane, things like background color, font color, data bars. And we have the ability to toggle on background color here for total revenue. And by default, we have a gradient, but we can also apply rules as well. So we can say, if this is like equal to the lowest number, then apply red, and we see that this value gets highlighted. Or we can say if it's between certain values, whatever, we can define rules in here. But we can also use a field value. And if we have more complicated type of logic that we want to use for our conditional formatting, we often do this within a DAX measure. And we can pick what DAX measure we want to use from this area here. So let's turn off this formatting for now. And let's have a look at what like a typical DAX measure could be. So if we do conditional formatting for our background, in this case, using just the rules, I was able to highlight the month with the lowest total revenue. We can do the same, define the same thing here in a DAX measure. So we can say, okay, calculate the minimum from our date table, and we want to summarize all the rows in our date table, but we just want to select our year, and we want to select our month, our year and our month, and we want to take the minimum of total revenue. I hate how the IntelliSense keeps popping up, but I think this is what we want to look at. Yeah, so here we go. We want to take the minimum spanning across this table of total revenue. Okay. And if we drop that into our matrix here, we see we return the same value that we highlighted. It's this 1.8 million here. So this is returning the correct lowest value. But if we want to use this for conditional formatting, we can wrap an if statement around this, or change this, or it might be better to change this into a variable. So we can see variable min month is equal to this formula. But then we want to do a comparison. So let's say a comparison variable. If our total revenue for a given month is equal to our min month total revenue, then we can just return a 1. And if nothing, we can return a 0. And we can just return comp. Okay. So if we commit that, now we see that this, again, this lowest month is highlighted with a 1. Everything else is a 0. We don't strictly need the 0. We could just return the 1. That would make it a little bit clearer. So let's just remove that 0. So now we see on our matrix visual, we're returning a 1 for this lowest month and nothing for anything else. And so now I can toggle on our background color again, and I can make a rule set based off of the value of this background measure. So if it's equal to 1, then return red and hit OK, and we get to the same place. Or what makes using a measure a little bit more convenient is instead of having to develop a rule set, instead of returning 1, we can return a value just like red as an example. So now we see that we get red returned just for this row. And if we update our rules, rather than saying if it is red and returning red, which does work, we can just use a field value and it will just put red in our matrix there. So we don't need our measure in our matrix. So this is how we can do conditional formatting using measures. So this is okay, it's not too bad, but this is quite a complicated DAX measure, because we essentially need to replicate in our measure the exact context in our visual, and then we need to define our rules down here and return it, and then we need to toggle and do stuff. But we can actually do this exact same thing using a visual calculation. So I'm going to create a custom visual calculation, and I'm going to reuse the same logic from a measure, but rather than defining it in a measure, defining it in the field, the visual calculation. And I'll show you why in just a second. So we'll say conditional formatting is equal to min x. This time for our table, we don't actually need to do that big complicated statement. We can just say from our rows, calculate the minimum total revenue. The expression is total revenue. If I do that, then we get to the same point we were before. This returns just the minimum total revenue month, or the amount of total revenue that was in the lowest month. And I can do the same thing here. We can say if our total revenue is equal to our minimum total revenue, we can just return red. And we see down here, in the same one, we're returning red for our visual calculation. But what's cool about this is now we can update our background color to, rather than point to our CF background measure, just our conditional formatting visual calculation field that we created. It's not letting me do this right now, and I will explain why. If we go to data format, conditional formatting, we need to return this as text. And now if I go back to our background color, we should be able to apply our conditional formatting, hit OK. And you know what, just to prove that that works, why don't I choose a different color than red? Let's say green. And we see that this is returning green now. So what's nice about this is not only is it a little bit easier to define here, we don't need to define a table at all. We can just say within the context of this visual, define this. But what works for this as well is if I turn on, let's turn on font color, and I'm going to use our background measure as the font color. What's nice about this is we can actually toggle off viewing this visual calculation for the conditional formatting. So we don't actually see it within our fields well. It's still being applied to the visual, but it's hidden now as a field. Another advantage of visual calculation is if I wanted to look at something like client name and put it on my axis and take off year, our background color from our visual calculation still works because I'm just looking at the rows of the visual. But notice how that font color, which was using our DAX measure, doesn't work anymore. And that's because within that DAX measure, I'm explicitly referring to our date dimension, and nothing from our date is on the rows of our visual anymore. So I would need to go and create another measure for this, which, why don't we just copy paste it? Like CF background for our client, where we're still using min-x on our client dimension. We're still doing that same, the same logic. Let's update this to say red. And then we need to update this, instead of being CF background, let's make this CF background client. And now that red font comes in. So we have to switch between different measures to get our conditional formatting to work. But for visual calculations, our conditional formatting just updates regardless of what we put within the context of our visual, which is going to save us a ton of time. And we only have to define our conditional formatting once, and it updates to everything. And we can apply the same conditional formatting onto things like our line chart as well. I'm just going to stick with what we got to today with our matrix visual for now. But this is a really cool use of visual calculations using conditional formatting. So not just doing things that we've done in measures for stuff like running totals and moving averages, but also for conditional formatting of our visuals. So this was a really cool technique that I learned from one of Boss's YouTube videos. I definitely recommend you check that out. He does some really cool stuff with visual calculations. So I sort of was inspired by one of his videos for this demo. But we can really see how going from defining everything explicitly in DAX for every unique visual to going from replicating that same logic but applying it as visual calculation, we can build it once and then just copy the visual, change things, do whatever, and that logic exists, again, just within the context of that visual, which is nice because then you don't create a bunch of DAX measures in your data model that you may only really need to use once anyway. So that brings us to the end of the second scenario, which is visual calculations. So I'm just going to check back in with the chat here. Let's have a look here. Totally not dissing visual calculations, but the joy of hitting the right DAX measure is another level. Yes, I couldn't agree more. It is nice when it is fulfilling to see. It is fulfilling to see a DAX measure finally work after trying to picture your data model in your head. But yes, visual calculations can definitely save you time. Can the section on the graph also change? The section on the graph also change color. If you mean like the line chart, yes, Casper, I think if it's the line chart you're referring to, we can apply this same sort of conditional formatting onto any visual type, not just the matrix visual. Do you have a link on who you mentioned with the visual calcs, the YouTube video? Yes, for sure. I will drop that in the chat just at the end of the session, and I can also have it on my website on this presentation page as well. But yeah, I'll drop it in the chat for sure. All right, well, let's move on to our third and our final scenario, which is our bookmark navigators. So in this third scenario, what we want to do is we want to add some sort of like user experience element onto our report page here in the side panel, which I've left space for right here, so that our users can interact with some bookmarks that we've set up. So the new way to do this is with a bookmark navigator. And so bookmark navigators and page navigators that came out at the same time, I believe, can really help simplify navigation in reports because they automatically generate button-based navigators for us for either our pages or bookmarks. So our bookmark navigator, again, generates these navigation buttons for us. It automatically syncs with any bookmarks that we create or remove. It updates with the order of our bookmarks. And we can do deeper formatting, like a selected state or an unselected state, while also respecting our bookmark groupings as well. So these navigators were introduced, I think, 4 years ago. I think it was the end of 2021 that these navigators came in. So we're coming up to 4 years of doing these. But before we jump into bookmark navigators, let's take a look at the old way to do this. So let's open up our bookmarks pane here. And we see that we have 4 bookmarks. I'm just going to click through them in sequence. We have a 22 bookmark, which selects the year 2022 from our slicer and business from our employee department slicer. If we look at 23, we're selecting the year 2023 and the consultant department. And if we click on 24, we're selecting 2024 and our finance department. And we also have a page reset bookmark as well.
Hello.
So, oh, hello?
Hi.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought there was a question. But so we have these 3 bookmarks, and we want our users to be able to interact with these bookmarks on our page. So one of the things we can do is to create a button for this. So if I go to the Insert tab on the ribbon, let's insert a button. In this case, I'm going to just use a blank button for now. And so this is sort of the formula that we would have to use. We would create select a button, and then we can format an action to that button as a bookmark, and we can select this 2022 bookmark, and then we can apply some formatting to it. So we could say we want this to say 2022 or just 22. Let's leave that as size 10. We could do things like change the shape of this. Let's do that. Yeah, let's leave it just like this for now. We can do other things like changing the color and setting the background. But if I can control click on this button, we do get to our 2022 bookmark. But there's a few things that's sort of a drawback to this. Is right now when we look at our button, there's no way to, well, first of all, there's no way to know that this button was even selected. Obviously, our page moved, and we see that we have slicer selections now, but the button itself remains the same, whether we're on a different view of the page, we've reset the page, or whether we've clicked onto this button. So that's not yeah, this isn't ideal. So let's just start here. And how we have dealt with this in the past is we can create a different version of this same button. We can add a fill to this button, like a nice blue maybe. We can change the text to white. And then we would just need to update an action to the bookmark to go from that 2022 to page reset, because that's another drawback of the button right now. There's no way to sort of like go back. If I click this bookmark, there's no way to unclick it. We have to right now navigate to our bookmarks pane and do a page reset or hit the slicers. So what we can do is we can set up a different button with the exact same formatting. We can link it to page reset, and then we can layer these buttons on top of each other. So then when I click on our page reset, this works. But now these two buttons are on top of each other, so we need to do a little bit more formatting. So if we drag from our selection pane, let's rename our buttons here to select 2022 button. And this one is the reset 2022 button. So our select is on top, which is great, but we've layered them. We can still sort of see them. So maybe we need to update our bookmark. In this case, we want to select the two slicers we're using. Let's also select our select button. In this case, let's hide it, and we can update our bookmark. And we'll have to do the same thing with our page reset. We're going to select our reset button, hide it, update this. So now when we click on our 2022 button, we go to our 2022 bookmark. Oh, I hit the wrong one. Let's hide this and up, and let's hide this, and we can update. So I select 2022. We're going to, oh, come on. See, this is what a big pain of doing bookmarks with buttons manually. We need to select just a few visuals. Let's update our bookmark. Here we go. So now we can select, when we select 2022, we go to this bookmark that we've linked to, and we have a reset button, and then when we reset, we can just see that 2022 button. And then if I want to do the same thing for the 23 bookmark and the 24 bookmark, and you can see, you know, it's really easy to hide the wrong things, show the wrong things. It's a big pain to use buttons. It's a big pain to have to hide or show things depending on what button you click and what bookmark you want to show. And to be honest, even the fact that I was like fumbling around a little bit, very representative of the real world experience of developing buttons and bookmarks. If you've done this yourself, I know you'll definitely have been there as well. But what we can do instead, which is nice, is to use a bookmark navigator. And this is going to save us a ton of time. So I'm going to hit the insert tab on the ribbon again. And under buttons, right at the bottom, we have this navigator section where we can see page navigator and we can see bookmark navigator. So I'm going to select bookmark navigator. And by default, we see that all of the bookmarks that we have in our bookmarks pane are here. We see 22, 23, 24, and page reset. Under the format tab of our navigator, on the bottom here for bookmarks, we can actually specify what bookmarks we want to show. And a useful capability of this is if we select the three bookmarks, 22, 23, 24, that we all want to see in our navigator, I can group these together and we can rename this to like our year bookmarks. And when I do that, then from our bookmark navigator dropdown now, we can select just one group of bookmarks, which is our year bookmarks. So now we see we just have these three bookmarks to choose from. Everything toggles, everything's nice. We can see we have a selected state of the bookmark that we choose. And it also responds to our sort order. So right now we have 22, 24, 23. If I want to drag 24 underneath on our bookmarks pane, now it's displayed in that correct order. And if I want to allow deselection, what's nice is I can select another bookmark for when I deselect that it goes to. So in this case, it's our page reset. Rather than toggling between 22, I can just click off of 23 and we go to our page reset. Or if I click 22 and want to click off that, it's our page reset. And I only have to set up that once. I don't need to be fumbling around with buttons and bookmarks and in our selection pane hiding and showing things. And all the formatting that I apply to this can be done just at once. I can like update the shape of everything. We can make it in pills. We can update the style, like we can bold the font of everything. We can set the default state and the selected state. So if I want, when it's selected, right now it's black, let's change that to blue. That will update for everything in our navigator. And so it's really easy for me to just resize this down like that. And we can just pop that right in our side panel here. Let's resize it a little bit more. And in just a few clicks, we're able to have, you know, a really nice experience with bookmarks that we've set up without needing to update all the individual bookmarks to like hide everything except for the 22 button or the page reset, or this is what it should look like when it's filled. It's just everything is built into the formatting pane. We're just clicking around and we're able to have like a nice experience for our users on our page by using this native functionality. So that brings us to the end of this scenario and the end of our presentation. So I just want to check in with the chat before I sign off. So yeah, dreaded open mic happens to all of us. Yes, sorry about that. I'm glad that we've sorted that out. I just tried it. Mine is completely blank, but it could be because I have over 100 bookmarks. If you're talking about the page navigator, yeah, I'm not sure if there's a limit to how that works with the bookmark navigator. Maybe that's something we can take offline, but it's definitely a really handy a handy shortcut from what we used to have to do to get these bookmarks and buttons linked together. Is now just built in. Formatting is easier, setup's easier. All we have to do is set up our bookmarks. But yeah, I think with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. So thank you everyone for attending today, my Power BI Mixtape Volume 2. Again, this was just a celebration of the 10th anniversary of Power BI, seeing how far we've come, seeing some really cool native functionality now with our field parameters, with our visual calculations, with our bookmark navigator. We went through some of the pains of what we used to have to do with DAX and our data model and our data transformation, and particularly with linking bookmarks and buttons together, and just how simple some of these pretty core elements of Power BI are now, with new features that have come in the last 10 years. Some of it you may have seen when I've done the What's New in Power BI. So I'm not sure if Ken is back on the chat or not.
I am
I see
back,
you.
yes.
Okay,
so
cool.
It's crazy, isn't it, when you look at this thing from where it was and to where it is now. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't often take the time to sit back and look back and see what that evolution is. And it's, yeah, awesome. Cool stuff. Thanks,
Excellent.
Joseph, again for doing this, and thanks for being such a big part. I couldn't have had a better person kick off year 10 for this. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the session here. I will get this all produced and posted. So if you want to review any of it, say 24 to 48 hours, we should have this up on YouTube, and we'll post on the Meetup site once it's available. And yeah, don't forget that there's some good sessions coming up. Puneet Goja coming up in a couple of weeks for our Excel stuff, and we'll announce our exciting presenter once we've got our finals I's and T's crossed and dotted, and not in that order, as soon as it's ready to go. So watch our Meetup site for that. So thanks everyone for coming. Thanks for another great session, Joseph. We'll see you all next time.